They say love is about freedom. But what if the love you fell into was a cage? One you thanked them for locking? I thought I found my soulmate. She made me feel seen, wanted, needed. But behind her smile was a blueprint, a carefully orchestrated descent into control. This isn't just a love story. It's a psychological unraveling, where obsession wore the face of intimacy, and affection became a weapon. I didn't realize I was being rewritten until I no longer recognized my own reflection. This is the story of how I gave everything in the name of love, and how I finally took it back. Welcome to the skillful art of manipulation. If you haven't already, please consider following us on your favorite podcast platform. Today, we present to you the surprising connection between control and love. Let's dive into this thrilling narrative together. Chapter 1. The Hook in Her Smile. They say love is the ultimate freedom, the soaring kind. The kind that lifts you out of yourself and makes you feel infinite, boundless, limitless, weightless. A union of souls without shackles, without force. That's the fairy tale, isn't it? But I've learned that love, in its most dangerous form, doesn't feel like flying. It feels like drowning in velvet, soft, slow, and sweet until you can't breathe. When I met her, Lena, I didn't fall in love. I stepped into it, like a trap disguised as comfort, like a room with no doors that looked from the outside, like home. I didn't realize what I was stepping into because I wanted to believe the warmth was real. And by the time the heat turned to fire, it was too late. The walls had already melted behind me. Let me tell you everything. I was 32, not old, not young. One of those ages that people call stable, though I never felt it. I had my own practice, mental health counseling, specialized in trauma recovery and emotional abuse. Ironic now, isn't it? I thought I knew the signs. I thought I understood manipulation. I thought my empathy would protect me from ever becoming a victim. But the truth is, you can study every pattern and still not see the one happening to you. I wasn't lonely, exactly. Just open. Vulnerable in the way that only people who've spent too much time analyzing themselves tend to be. I didn't need Lena. I wasn't looking for someone to save me. But maybe that's why she was so effective. She didn't come offering salvation. She came offering curiosity, intrigue, that quiet thrill of mystery that lives somewhere between danger and desire. I met her in the kind of place people write poems about. A quiet coffee shop tucked behind a used bookstore. It smelled like cinnamon and wet paperbacks. That day, I remember it was raining. The kind of soft, gentle drizzle that makes everything feel like it's moving in slow motion. She was already sitting there, alone, by the window, her fingers wrapped around a porcelain cup like it was something fragile. She wore this deep red sweater that clung to her like sin, and lipstick to match. Her hair was wet at the tips, like she hadn't bothered to bring an umbrella. Or maybe she liked the rain. She looked like someone who liked the rain. When I walked in, she looked up. And that's when it happened, the smile. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't flirtatious. It was knowing. Like she saw something in me no one else ever had. Like she recognized me, though we'd never met. She tilted her head the way predators do when they're curious. Not hungry, not yet, but interested. Focused. I felt seen. Truly, terrifyingly seen. There's a kind of intimacy in being watched like that. Not with lust. Not even with admiration, but with strategy. And God help me, I didn't flinch. I smiled back. That moment was the first thread. She spoke first, asked if I liked the book under my arm, The Drama of the Gifted Child. I laughed, told her it was for a client. She asked me if I always read other people's problems. I told her I get paid to. She said, that must make you good at pretending you're not fucked up yourself. I stared at her for a full 3 seconds, then laughed again. Hook, line, sinker. We talked for 3 hours that day. I learned nothing about her, but she learned everything about me. My work, my past, my parents, my exes, my fears. She listened with the kind of attention that makes you feel like the only voice in the world that matters. I walked away thinking she was an enigma. Someone who'd entered my life by accident or fate or some alignment of lonely stars. It wasn't fate. It was design. In the days that followed, we kept running into each other, always by chance. At the bookstore, at the wine bar near my office, on the subway platform once, where she acted surprised, but didn't miss a beat when she asked if I'd like to walk her home. I told myself it was serendipity. But no, it was fucking orchestration. When we finally kissed, it wasn't tentative. It wasn't soft. It was ownership. Her hand fisted the collar of my coat like she was claiming something. Like I was a thing to possess. I didn't care. I let her. I wanted her to take. There's a sick thrill in surrendering to someone who makes you feel like surrender is the only sane choice. That was the beginning. She didn't ask to move in. She started leaving things at my apartment, first a toothbrush, then a drawer, then a set of keys. It was seamless, like she'd always belonged. I didn't question it. Her presence was like perfume, lingering even when she wasn't around. When she was gone, the absence felt like withdrawal, like something sacred had been taken from me. At first, everything was beautiful. We cooked together. We talked for hours. We had sex like it was war, passionate, ruthless, consuming. She made me feel like the most important man alive. But only when I followed the script she had in her head. The one I didn't know existed until I started missing my lines. She started testing me in small ways. Going silent when I said something she didn't like. Picking fights over imagined slights. Disappearing for hours. Then reappearing with stories that didn't quite make sense. When I questioned her, "You're too sensitive. Stop overanalyzing everything. You're making something out of nothing." At first, I believed her. After all, I was sensitive. I did overthink. But then it started to morph, subtle shifts. Rewriting conversations. Gaslighting in casual, almost affectionate ways. She'd swear I'd said things I never remembered saying. Laugh at my confusion. Make me doubt myself in the most loving tone imaginable. "You need to trust me more," she'd whisper, tracing her nails down my spine. That's what love is. Total trust. But trust, in her language, meant compliance. Soon, I stopped bringing up inconsistencies. I stopped asking questions. I told myself it was compromise, that all relationships required bending. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't bending anymore. I was being reshaped, rewritten, remolded into someone more palatable, more pliable, more dependent. And the scariest part? I loved her more because of it. That's the paradox, isn't it? When someone controls you so completely that you start to measure your worth through their gaze. You stop existing outside of them. You lose the mirror. And all that's left is their reflection. She made me feel like her love was a reward, a scarce resource. And every time I earned it, I felt like I'd done something heroic. But love shouldn't feel like a fucking achievement. It shouldn't come with conditions or punishments or silence like a blade under your ribs. Still, I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because she made me believe that the only thing more terrifying than being with her was being without her. This was love, and I was already lost in it. Chapter 2, Rules of Engagement, Extended Edition. There are moments in a relationship that define the line between love and control. Quiet, barely noticeable moments. The ones that don't scream. The ones that whisper. You don't realize they matter until long after they've passed. And by then, you've already traded pieces of yourself for something you can't name. Something that looks like affection, but feels like obedience. With Lena, those moments began as games. She'd say things like, "If you really cared, you'd know why I'm upset," and then go silent for hours. Days. She wouldn't yell, wouldn't even raise her voice. Her silence was her blade, and she wielded it with precision. I'd find myself replaying every conversation in my head, trying to decode what I'd done wrong. Because it had to be me, right? She was calm. I was anxious. That meant I was the unstable one. It started with little things. A sideways glance when I laughed too loud at someone else's joke. A distant tone when I came home 10 minutes later than I said I would. At first, I tried to talk it out, rationally, calmly. I'd explain, apologize, reassure. But every time I reached for resolution, she'd move the finish line, change the rules. And I kept playing. Looking back, I think the most dangerous thing wasn't that she manipulated me. It was that I let her. Not out of stupidity, not out of weakness, but out of a desperate, subconscious need to protect what I thought was love. A need to earn her back, even when I hadn't actually lost her. One night, about a month after she unofficially moved in, I made dinner. Chicken piccata, white wine, candles, the whole performance. She barely touched the food. Didn't say anything until I asked her how her day was. Her fork clinked against the plate. "That's a weird question," she said flatly. "What?" I asked, blinking. She looked up at me like I'd just insulted her. "You don't usually ask me about my day." "Yes, I do." "No, you ask me what I did. That's different." I paused. "Okay, well, how was your day?" Too late. The damage had been done. She got up from the table, poured herself another glass of wine, and spent the rest of the evening scrolling through her phone, completely detached. That night, she didn't sleep in bed. She curled up on the couch. When I tried to talk to her, she shushed me, said she was tired, said I was making a big deal out of nothing. And the worst part? I believed her. I spent the next morning apologizing for the way I phrased a question. I brought her flowers. Lavender and white roses, her favorites. Or at least, I thought they were. I was still learning the script, still trying to perfect my role. And she smiled. Just a little. Enough to let me believe I was forgiven. Enough to make me feel like I'd won her love back. It was like that every time. She'd withdraw. I'd chase. She'd ice me out. I'd melt myself to reach her. It became our dynamic, this unspoken contract of emotional imbalance. She told me once, during one of our better weeks, "You have a need to be the fixer. That's why you're so attracted to me." I should have taken it as a warning, but instead I took it as truth. She saw me. She understood the parts of me that I didn't want anyone else to see, the rescuer complex, the perfectionist, the therapist who couldn't shut it off. And she used it. Brilliantly. She never raised her voice, never called me names. That's the thing about smart manipulators. They know not to leave bruises where anyone else can see them. They don't need to shout when silence does the job just fine. But it wasn't all bad. And that's what made it harder to leave. There were nights where she'd curl into me like a child, vulnerable and quiet, and tell me about her mother. How she left when Lena was 10. How her father used alcohol like it was medicine. How she learned early that love was performance, that you only got affection if you played the part. Those nights broke me. They made me want to hold her forever, to rewrite her childhood through the way I loved her, to prove that I could be different. She'd cry sometimes, curled up on my chest, and whisper things like, "You make me feel safe, but I don't know how to handle that." And I'd feel chosen, special, like I was saving her. Like I was the one man who could finally teach her what love really looked like. But even that was part of the game. She knew how to weaponize her wounds, to use her trauma as justification for every unexplained absence, every irrational mood swing, every guilt trip. She turned her pain into a pass for everything. And I gave it to her, every time, because I loved her. Or at least, I thought I did. I stopped seeing my friends. Gradually. Lena never told me I couldn't, but she'd sigh whenever I mentioned plans. She'd say things like, "It's just funny how you always have energy for them, but not for me." I canceled dinners, stopped replying to texts. I told myself I was just prioritizing my relationship, but in reality, I was being isolated slowly, skillfully, and completely. She didn't want me to be alone. She wanted me to be hers. Eventually, my identity started to blur. I wasn't the confident, grounded man I had once been. I second-guessed everything. What to say, how to say it, when to say nothing at all. I kept a mental checklist of Lena's triggers. I avoided topics, filtered my tone. I walked on glass every fucking day and smiled while I did it. Because that's what love is, right? Sacrifice? Compromise? God, how I twisted those words into something unrecognizable. One afternoon, I caught her going through my phone. I came out of the shower and saw her scrolling. Not fast, not frantic, calm. like she had every right to be there. When I asked her what she was doing, she didn't flinch. "I just needed to check something," she said, without looking up. "You could have asked. I didn't think you'd mind." I should have shouted, should have demanded privacy. But instead I froze, because part of me was terrified of what she might have found, even though there was nothing there. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. I was more afraid of upsetting her than I was of being disrespected. That's when you know you've lost control. And yet, I stayed, because the thought of losing her felt like death, like walking away from the only air I knew how to breathe. I'd built my life around her, rewired my nervous system to crave her approval. My emotions lived in response to her, happy when she smiled, hollow when she didn't. I wasn't just in love, I was addicted. And addiction doesn't care about your logic. It only cares about the next high, the next smile, the next hit of validation. And she knew exactly how much to give and when to keep me coming back. That was the second chapter of our love story. Not a fairy tale, not a romance, but a blueprint of power, of dependence, of a connection that was never about love, but about control. Chapter 3. Strings I Didn't See. Control doesn't come with a label. It doesn't announce itself when it walks into your life. It doesn't slap you across the face or tie you to a chair. No, control is quiet. It's patient. It smiles when it enters the room. It kisses you on the forehead. It asks if you're okay, even as it slowly rewrites your definition of okay. And by the time you realize how deep you're in, you've already made peace with the fact that maybe you're the problem. That's what it felt like with Lena. Like I was the unstable one. Like I was the one who needed to try harder, be better, be calmer, be less emotional, be more intuitive, be less needy, be less me. It happened so gradually that I couldn't even trace when the shift took place. But somewhere between month 3 and month 6, I stopped feeling like a partner. I became something else. A servant? A possession? A project? I couldn't even tell you. But what I know for sure is that I didn't feel equal anymore. There was one moment, one very specific moment, where I knew things were not what they seemed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no shattered glass, no bruises. Just a look, a flicker, a crack in the facade. We were at dinner with her friends, people I didn't know. Lena had insisted we go. I was exhausted from work, emotionally drained, but she said it would mean a lot to her. So I went. I wore the shirt she liked. I shaved. I smiled. I drank the wine she ordered for me, even though I didn't want to. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh, nodded when I was supposed to nod. And then one of her friends asked a question, simple, harmless. "So how did you two meet?" Before I could answer, Lena cut in. "Oh, he was obsessed with me," she said, laughing. "Followed me around like a lost puppy for weeks. I finally gave him a chance because I felt bad for him." The table laughed. I didn't. She looked at me, eyes daring me to contradict her. I froze, smiled, chuckled along, because correcting her would have made me the problem, the party killer, the insecure boyfriend. I knew how the game worked by then, knew that speaking up would only paint me as unstable, overly sensitive, unfun. So I swallowed it. And later, when I brought it up in the car, she sighed like I'd asked her to solve a world crisis. "Why are you so dramatic?" she said. "It was just a joke." God, why do you have to make everything about you? That line, why do you have to make everything about you? It became her default script, her way of shutting me down, of making me question my right to feel anything. It was during that car ride that I realized something was very, very wrong. But I didn't leave, because I still wanted her, needed the version of her that existed in my memories. The Lena who kissed my neck at 3 a.m. and whispered that I made her feel whole. The Lena who cried in my arms and said I was the only man who made her feel safe. The Lena who told me I was the love of her life right before she vanished for the weekend and left me drowning in silence. That's the genius of a manipulator. They never erase the good moments. They feed them to you like sugar between the poison. Just enough to keep you coming back. Just enough to keep you hoping. And hope, I've learned, is the most dangerous thing a person can weaponize. I started keeping secrets, not from her, but from myself. I started justifying things I never would have tolerated in the past. The gaslighting, the coldness, the inconsistency. I told myself she was damaged, that she was healing, that it was my job to love her through it. It wasn't love. It was conditioning. She'd pull away, and I'd chase. She'd accuse me of being too much, and I'd become smaller. She'd make jokes at my expense in public, then kiss me deeply in private. And I started to crave that kiss like oxygen, because it meant I was okay again. It meant she wasn't mad. It meant I'd passed the test. Every interaction became a test. One night, she disappeared. I came home to an empty apartment. No note, no text, no call, nothing. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Nothing. I stayed up all night, staring at the ceiling, imagining car crashes, kidnappings, fires. She came back the next morning at 9 a.m. like nothing happened. She tossed her bag on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and asked if I wanted eggs or pancakes. I asked her where she'd been. She paused, narrowed her eyes. Are you seriously going to interrogate me the second I walk through the door? I didn't hear from you all night. I didn't know I had to check in with my fucking parole officer. I was worried, Lena. I'm not your property. And just like that, I became the villain. I spent the rest of the day apologizing for my tone, for not trusting her, for suffocating her. And when she finally forgave me, with a soft smile and her head on my chest, I felt this sick, euphoric relief. Like I'd just survived something. Like I'd earned back her grace. That's what abuse feels like when it's not physical. It feels like earning your own safety, like walking on eggshells and calling it love, like mistaking anxiety for excitement, like confusing control with care. She'd say things like, if you didn't love me so much, you wouldn't get so upset. Or, other guys would love to have someone like me. Why are you so ungrateful? And I'd nod, take it in, internalize it, believe it. I stopped trusting myself entirely. I started journaling just to track reality, writing down exact words from our arguments so I could check later if I'd imagined things. Because she was so convincing when she rewrote the narrative, so confident, so calm. And I was unraveling, inside, quietly, desperately. I remember sitting in the shower one night, fully clothed, because the silence in the apartment was too loud and I didn't know where else to go. I remember staring at the tile and thinking, how did I get here? And the worst part? I didn't even blame her. I blamed me, because she made sure I did. She planted this voice in my head that echoed even when she wasn't speaking. That told me I was too much, too needy, too dramatic. That no one else would ever understand me the way she did. That no one else would stay the way she had. So I clung to her harder, because I believed the lie that she was the only one who could love me. And that, I think, is the cruelest manipulation of all. Making someone believe that the cage is safer than the world outside. Chapter 4. The Science of Surrender. You don't realize you've lost yourself until you try to find your way back, and there's no map left. No coordinates. Just a fog where your identity used to be. I used to have opinions. I used to speak with certainty. I used to say no. But Lena rewrote the meaning of those things. Slowly, subtly, until I couldn't tell the difference between compromise and collapse. And the worst part? I called it love. I remember reading somewhere that in neuroscience, addiction and love light up the same areas of the brain. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. Your brain doesn't care if the high is from heroin or a heartbeat. It just knows it wants more, needs more, and it will tolerate almost anything for another hit. That's what Lena became to me. Not a person, a chemical, an experience, a carefully engineered series of highs and lows that trained my nervous system to respond to chaos with craving. She made me depend on her emotionally by creating the very emptiness only she could fill. That's the kind of control most people never talk about. We talk about abuse like it's fire and bruises and screaming matches. But control, the masterful kind, feels like devotion. like discipline, like obsession dressed up in romance. It's the slow erosion of self under the illusion of closeness. Lena didn't isolate me by force. She did it by subtle substitution. One by one, she replaced my coping mechanisms with her. Used to have gym time every morning? Now it was coffee with her, because we never have time anymore. Used to journal in the evenings? Why do you write things down instead of just talking to me? Used to call my sister twice a week? I think it's weird how close you two are. It's like emotional incest. I know, it sounds absurd now, but at the time, when you're wrapped in the intimacy of shared routines and whispered secrets, you want to believe that the person next to you is just being honest. That they see something you don't. That maybe, just maybe, they know you better than you know yourself. It's seductive. And she was seductive. Not just in the bedroom, though that was part of it too. She used sex as both punishment and reward. If I did something she liked, unexpected flowers, an apology for a fight I didn't start, agreeing with her over a friend, I'd get passion, intimacy, release. If I questioned her or challenged her or withdrew even a little, nothing. Sometimes for days. And then suddenly, without warning, she'd crawl into bed at 3 a.m., pull me into her warmth and whisper, "I hate fighting with you. You mean everything to me." And I'd melt. Because the relief was orgasmic. Because when someone trains you to expect pain, even a moment of softness feels like salvation. It's fucked up, but it works. That's why cult leaders and dictators and narcissistic lovers all follow the same damn blueprint. Tear down the old version of you, make you doubt your own eyes, then offer themselves as the only version of truth you can trust. Lena was my truth, or so I thought. She began introducing new rules. Not stated ones, she was too smart for that, but implied, silent, invisible threads that grew tighter with every interaction. Don't leave your phone face down when she's around. It makes her suspicious. Don't bring up her mother, ever. Don't disagree with her in public. That's betrayal. Don't post photos without showing her first. Don't mention your female coworkers. Don't be too quiet. She'll think you're hiding something. Don't be too enthusiastic. She'll accuse you of faking it. Don't win. Don't lose. Don't be too much. Don't be too little. Just be what she needs you to be in the moment. And maybe you'll make it through the day without walking into one of her emotional landmines. I began rehearsing conversations in my head before having them. I started editing texts 10 times before sending them. I began timing how long I looked at waitresses so I wouldn't accidentally disrespect her by blinking too slow. You think I'm exaggerating? I wish I was. She once cried in the middle of a dinner because I didn't order dessert with her. Said it made her feel alone. Like I was punishing her body image. I had no idea what to say. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out how cheesecake had become a betrayal. The next day, I ordered dessert for both of us, even when she wasn't there, just in case. I know how insane that sounds. But when you live in a relationship built on emotional volatility, predictability becomes your god. Routine becomes your weapon. If you can just stay one step ahead of their moods, maybe, just maybe, you can stay safe. And that's what I was doing by then. Not loving. Surviving. There was one night I'll never forget. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing outwardly explosive. But it shook me in a way I still haven't fully recovered from. We were in bed, side by side. She was scrolling. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart racing for no reason at all. That's how most of our nights had become, quiet wars, fought under blankets and fake yawns. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Do you ever feel like you die without me?" I didn't answer right away. Something about the way she said it, calm, curious, clinical, made my skin crawl. I turned my head to look at her. She was still scrolling. I asked quietly, "Do you?" She smiled. Not at me, just at her screen, and whispered, "Of course I do." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that smile, about how love and obsession had become the same thing, about how control doesn't always look like chains. Sometimes it looks like devotion. Sometimes it looks like a hand on your chest at 4 a.m., pulling you in tighter while whispering, "I love you so much it hurts." And sometimes it's not a lie. It's just the most dangerous kind of truth. Because people like Lena don't manipulate for sport. They manipulate because they believe, deep in their fractured hearts, that control is love, and that losing it feels like death. So they keep pulling tighter, and you keep letting them, because the fear of abandonment is more unbearable than the weight of their grip. At least it was for me. At least until the day I realized the scariest part of losing her wasn't the loss. It was the possibility that without her, I wouldn't know who the hell I was anymore. Chapter 5. The God Complex. There's a difference between love and worship. But when you're in the thick of it, when your mind has been so thoroughly entangled with someone else's that you can't tell where their wants end and yours begin, that line starts to blur. And soon enough, what you call devotion is just submission dressed in sweeter language. That was me. By the time month 9 rolled around, Lena wasn't just my partner. She was my compass, my source of truth, my standard for worthiness. If she was happy, I could breathe. If she was cold, I shriveled. If she smiled, the sun came out. If she frowned, I collapsed into myself like a dying star. She didn't have to raise her voice anymore. She didn't need to. I was already conditioned. There's this phrase psychologists use, learned helplessness. It's what happens when a person, after repeated exposure to uncontrollable stress or abuse, eventually stops trying to escape, even when the door's wide open, even when help is available, because they've come to believe, deep down, that nothing will change, that they are powerless. That pain is inevitable. That was my reality, and I never even saw the shift happen, because Lena was smart. She wasn't a brute. She didn't punch or scream or slam doors. She didn't isolate me by force. She didn't have to rip me away from my friends. She made me choose her over and over until there was no one left to run to. Her control came dressed in reason. She'd say things like, "I just think it's weird how your best friend touches your arm when she talks to you." Or, "I've never felt truly accepted by your friends. I don't think they like me. I just wish you'd stand up for me more." And each time, I'd choose her. Out of guilt. Out of fear. Out of love. At least, I thought it was love. But it wasn't love. It was programming. One Sunday morning, I made the mistake of saying no. She wanted me to come with her to a wellness retreat, a 3-day getaway with a bunch of her yoga friends, 2 hours outside the city. Normally, I'd go, even if I hated those things. Even if I knew I'd feel out of place, bored, overstimulated. I'd go because it kept her happy. But this time I didn't. I had a long week. My anxiety had been flaring up like a fever I couldn't break. My chest felt heavy every morning. I hadn't slept properly in days. So when she asked, I said very gently, "I think I need a weekend to myself." The silence that followed was the kind that carries weight. Not emptiness, weight. Like a thick fog settling in your lungs. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood up, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door behind her. And that was that. She didn't say goodbye when she left. Didn't text me all weekend. Didn't answer when I called. And when she came back, she pretended like nothing happened. Until 2 days later, when she looked up from her laptop, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp as glass. "You know, it's funny," she said. "I spent the whole weekend wondering why I felt abandoned by someone who swore they loved me." I froze. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even sound angry. But her words cut deeper than any insult ever could. And what did I do? I apologized. Again. I made her tea, bought her favorite wine, sat beside her, and asked if she wanted to talk. I offered 1,000 soft gestures to make up for the crime of needing space. And she forgave me, with a smirk, with a kiss, with sex so intense it felt like punishment and reward in the same breath. That was Lena's rhythm. Withdraw, punish, offer pleasure, forgive, repeat. It was a system, a cycle. I was no longer her partner. I was her subject. And she was my God. But the scariest part? She believed it too. Lena had a way of narrating reality that made you question your own senses. She could walk into a room, spin a story, and make you forget what you just saw with your own eyes. If I said you told me you'd be home by 9, she'd tilt her head and say, "No, I said around 9. You always twist things." If I caught her in a lie, like the time she said she was with a friend, only for that friend to call me an hour later, she'd cry, break down, say she felt trapped, say she was allowed to make mistakes. And somehow, I ended up comforting her. Every single time. It became second nature, protecting her from accountability. I watched her destroy friendships, sabotage work projects, ghost people she owed money to, and somehow, she was always the victim. The world was cruel. Everyone was jealous. No one understood her the way I did. And maybe they didn't, because they didn't worship her the way I did. But here's the twist, the part that messes with my head to this day. She did love me. In her own broken, distorted way, Lena truly believed she loved me. She clung to me like I was her salvation. She cried if I talked about leaving. She'd show up at my office with takeout, smiling like nothing ever happened. She'd whisper things like, "You're the only thing that makes me feel real," while her hands trembled around my face. She wasn't pretending. That's the part that haunts me. She believed her love was sacred. And maybe that's what made it so damn dangerous. Because love, in the hands of someone who confuses control with care, isn't love at all. It's possession. I was no longer a man. I was a mirror. And if I reflected anything less than adoration, she shattered me. One night, during one of our rare moments of calm, I asked her why she always needed me to prove myself. She was lying on my chest, tracing shapes into my skin. She didn't pause, didn't blink. She said, "Because I need to know you choose me. Every day, even when it hurts. Otherwise, how do I know it's real?" I didn't have an answer, because I had been choosing her. Every damn day, at the cost of my sanity, my peace, my autonomy. And yet, she never stopped testing me. Because control doesn't want love. It wants proof. Constant, endless proof. And love, in its truest form, doesn't survive under interrogation. It wilts. It crumbles. And eventually it dies. But I wasn't ready to face that truth yet. Not then. Because I was still trying to earn her trust. Still hoping I could love her hard enough to undo whatever darkness had built that fortress around her heart. I didn't understand that some people don't want healing. They want submission. They want a kingdom, not a connection. And they want you to bow. Every morning, every night, until you forget what it felt like to stand. Chapter 6. The Breaking Without Noise. People imagine breaking points as explosive. Screaming matches. Slamming doors. Someone packing a bag in a flurry while the other begs on their knees. Maybe that's how it looks in movies. But in real life, breaking is quieter. It starts in the small places first. The look in the mirror that lingers a second too long. The shower that becomes a place to cry silently. The dinner table that becomes a negotiation zone. The moment you tell a joke and realize you're the only one laughing. The 1,000 invisible cuts you pretend not to notice until one day, you're bleeding from somewhere you can't even see. With Lena, my breaking didn't come all at once. It was a series of collapses. Gentle implosions. And the sickest part? I was still trying to protect her from the weight of what she was doing to me. It had been a year. A full year. 365 days of walking on eggshells, adjusting my tone, timing my breathing, holding space for someone who never made room for me. My friends had drifted away, some out of frustration, others because they didn't recognize the person I had become. My phone was quieter, my inbox emptier, my world smaller. But Lena? She had never been more radiant. She thrived in control the way plants thrive in sunlight. And I had become her personal greenhouse, her incubator, her emotional oxygen tank. It wasn't just emotional anymore, either. The control had seeped into every part of my life. My wardrobe changed. I stopped wearing certain shirts because she said they looked too approachable. My music changed. She called my favorite artist depressing and masculine in a soft, weak way. So I let go of them, one playlist at a time. My words changed. She told me I sounded therapeutic and clinical, that I used words to hide behind. So I stopped. I shortened my sentences, made myself easier to digest. My language shrank, and so did I. I was no longer a man with edges and fire and choice. I was a shadow molded by her expectations. One morning, I made coffee. She came into the kitchen, looked at the mug I handed her, and asked, "Did you forget I asked for oat milk yesterday?" I told her we were out. She sighed, put the mug down like it had personally offended her, and said, "You never listen to me." That line, that fucking line, it wasn't about the milk. It never was. It was about control, about teaching me that even small deviations were punishable. I stood there in silence, watching her scroll through her phone like I didn't exist. And in that moment, something inside me cracked, not loudly, not violently, but undeniably. I started fantasizing about escape. Not in the literal sense, not at first. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't look at apartments. But in my mind, I started playing a new kind of movie. One where I lived alone, where I made coffee without consequence, where I laughed with friends, where I said things without flinching, where I remembered who I was. It was just a fantasy, but it was the first time in a long time I'd let myself imagine freedom. And like all dangerous things, that thought refused to go away. It followed me through the week, whispering in the quiet moments Lena couldn't reach. It echoed in the space between her criticisms. It sat with me at work, in the car, in the grocery store. It became a hum in the background of my life, slowly growing louder. What would happen if I left? Not because I stopped loving her, but because I started remembering myself. The final straw didn't look like a breakdown. It looked like a dinner party, our first real event in months. Lena insisted we host, said she wanted to reconnect with people. I knew what that really meant, performing for a room full of strangers while she orchestrated the entire evening like a showrunner directing a stage play. I did everything she asked, cleaned, cooked, dressed in the shirt she picked, smiled at her friends, told charming stories, laughed in all the right places. But sometime during the night, I went to the bathroom, and when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked polite, polished, controlled, but empty, like a mannequin that had been animated just enough to wave. That was the moment I knew, not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did. And that scared me more than any fight ever had. I didn't want to hate her. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted to be real again, to have a thought that wasn't filtered through her lens, to say something without bracing for punishment, to feel love without wondering if I'd paid for it with enough submission. When the last guest left, I was loading dishes. Lena came behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and whispered, "You were perfect tonight." And my body, my fucking body, flinched. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want her touch. Not anymore. That night, I laid next to her in bed, eyes wide open, counting the seconds between her breaths. She looked peaceful, innocent even, and maybe in some twisted way she was, but I wasn't. I was exhausted, not from the relationship, but from pretending I could survive inside it. And the most painful realization? She didn't even know she'd broken me. Because people like Lena don't see the break. They only see the rebellion. And I wasn't ready to rebel. Not yet. But the thought had landed. It had rooted itself somewhere deep in my chest, where love used to live. And once it takes hold, it grows. Quietly. Violently. I didn't leave the next day. Or the next week. But I started documenting things. Saving screenshots. Voice recording arguments, journaling with clarity again. I needed evidence, not just for others, but for myself. Because when someone rewires your reality, you have to rebuild your truth from scratch, brick by fucking brick. And I was ready to start laying the foundation, one thought at a time, one no at a time, one breath that belonged only to me. For the first time in a year, I was waking up. And that terrified me, because waking up means you have to choose. Go back to sleep, or get the hell out. Chapter 7. Leaving the Labyrinth. It doesn't happen like you think it will. There's no grand monologue. No standing in the rain with a suitcase. No crowd-pleasing exit with a final door slam that echoes into eternity. When I finally left Lena, it wasn't cinematic. It was terrifying, ugly, quiet, and real. I'd spent so long waiting for a reason big enough to leave. Waiting for her to hit me, to cheat on me, to betray me in some clear, undeniable way that would give me the moral high ground. That would make me feel justified. But that moment never came. Because the worst thing about psychological abuse is that it's not always made of monsters and knives. Sometimes it's just silence, small digs, vanished joy, the slow extinction of your own voice. I didn't leave because she changed. I left because I did. It started with a whisper in my head, an almost imperceptible voice I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. A voice that said, "You're still in here." And once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. I remember the exact moment I decided. Not when she belittled me in front of her friends. Not when she gaslit me into apologizing for crying after she vanished for a weekend. Not even when I sat in the ER one night after a panic attack, so intense I thought I was dying. And she texted to say I was being dramatic. It was the morning she made pancakes. I know. Stupid, right? But she was standing at the stove, humming, flipping pancakes like nothing was wrong. And I watched her. I watched the rhythm of her movements. The way she danced between the burner and the fridge. The way she smiled at me like we were still in the early days. And I realized something so horrifying. It almost made me sick right there on the kitchen tile. She believed everything was fine. She believed I was still hers. Still caught. Still devoted. And why wouldn't she? I had played my part perfectly. Smiled at the right moments. Soothed her insecurities. Apologized for bleeding when she stabbed me with silence. She had no idea I was already gone. That my soul had started packing its bags months ago. That my love for her, once bright and full and expansive, was now nothing more than embers. I watched her put a pancake on my plate, kiss my forehead, and say, "You're lucky to have someone who cares about the little things." And I smiled, not because I believed her, but because I knew it would be one of the last times I'd ever have to pretend. That week, I started preparing. I opened a new bank account, transferred small amounts of money each day, called old friends I hadn't spoken to in months, apologized without explaining. I didn't need them to understand everything. I just needed them to know I was still alive in here somewhere. I started going to therapy again. Real therapy. Not the kind where you analyze other people's trauma. The kind where someone looks you in the eye and asks, "Why do you think this is all you deserve?" That one wrecked me, because I didn't know how to answer. I spent weeks collecting myself, bit by bit. I got a storage unit. Moved small things when she wasn't home. My old books. My favorite mugs. Clothes I knew she wouldn't notice missing. I made copies of documents. I erased shared passwords. I scrubbed my laptop. And every night, I crawled into bed beside her like nothing had changed. Because that's the thing about escaping a prison built on manipulation. You have to become a better liar than your captor. The final day came on a Tuesday. She had a late meeting. I told her I was working from home. She kissed me goodbye, told me to order takeout if I didn't feel like cooking, and left in a rush. She didn't know she just said goodbye to me for the last time. As soon as she was gone, I moved fast. Grabbed the bag I had hidden in a closet. Loaded it with the last essentials, laptop, charger, my favorite hoodie. The journal I kept hidden behind a false panel in my desk drawer. And then I left. Just like that. No note. No text. No apology. Because you don't owe an apology for choosing to save your own life. I stayed at a friend's place that night. The first night away from her in nearly a year. I expected to feel free, liberated, unchained. But I didn't. I felt sick, guilty, afraid. Like I'd just betrayed someone I loved, even though she'd spent months betraying me. That's the twisted legacy of manipulation. It convinces you that you're the villain for setting yourself free. The calls started an hour later. Missed calls. Then texts. Where are you? Did something happen? Are you okay? Then it changed. You're seriously pulling this? Wow. You're so fucking dramatic. Then it turned. You're nothing without me. No one else will love you like I did. You don't walk away from me. I decide when it's over. That was her favorite line. I decide when it's over. The words of a person who never saw love as mutual, who saw people as property. I blocked her, changed my number the next day, deleted our shared cloud, switched my locks, ghosted her, the way she ghosted accountability for an entire year. And it hurt. God, it hurt more than I can explain. Because leaving someone you love, even when they've destroyed you, is still grief, still death, still a severing of dreams and routines and muscle memory. But what came next? That was resurrection. The first morning I woke up in silence, it was deafening. I cried. For hours. Grief poured out of me like something I'd been holding in since childhood. Like I'd finally been allowed to feel without punishment. I walked outside barefoot just to feel the earth under me, sat in a patch of sun and let it warm my face, listened to the world exist without needing anything from me. It took weeks, months, but eventually I started hearing my own voice again, not hers, mine. The voice that didn't apologize for being emotional, the voice that laughed too loud, the voice that loved sweet music and stupid memes and almond milk in his coffee. The voice she tried to erase, but didn't succeed. And here's the thing no one tells you. Healing doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you love yourself more. It means you see the difference between love and control, and you never confuse them again. It means you learn to build safety within yourself, so no one can weaponize your fear of being alone. I still think about her. Not often, but sometimes. When I hear a song she loved, when I pass that bookstore cafe where we met, when I make pancakes on a random Sunday morning and catch myself checking for oat milk. She was a storm. I was the tree that bent until it snapped. But the roots? They're still here. And now, they're growing toward the sun.